if you were a very thin wrapper of application software, it might be easy to code from scratch the first 50%. You know what we have inside of Xero? We have tens of thousands of edge cases in our code. There's so much you can do, obviously, inside of software development and how you code. There are areas or constrained areas where you might rewrite code with AI. But I think in a brownfield area, it's not as simple as like, just let AI write code. That doesn't seem super smart. So when you are a challenger in a market, you have to think about what you need to do really well and how you differentiate. It is a builder's era. And so for us, AI is a tremendous opportunity. But the first and most important thing is to understand.
This is Sukhinder Singh Cassidy, CEO of Xero. She's scaled Xero to over $2.7 billion in revenue across 5 million global customers. And today, she is breaking down why thin AI wrappers fail and the 2 things you need to double down on to win in a disrupted market.
Almost everywhere in the world, you don't want too much flexibility. What you want is like constrained flexibility. To my team, I said, hey, first things, just narrow your focus to a revenue number that would make you a US unicorn. We focused on that number, we got to that number. So I do think it's really about narrowing your scope first. Don't try to eat the elephant. I think that if you just stepped back and you took yourself out of the ecosystem of Silicon Valley, you know what the macro challenge is? We're all busy building. Like we have to stop and think about the customer's ability to adopt. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is not just the pace that we can all build at, but what is the pace? Cognitive adoption and comfort with these tools. Stop trying to serve everybody. Serve an area where you can differentiate, because a CEO's job is to create value for all constituents, shareholders, customers. And so while it's amazing to dream big, you need to help people figure out how to.
Welcome to New Economies. Sukhinder, welcome to New Economies. It's awesome to have you here. So much has been happening at Xero in the last 20 years and can't wait to dive in. So big welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you noted it. It's our 20-year anniversary this year. So an exciting time, an exciting history, but an even more exciting future, we hope.
I know it's 20 years because I started using the product when I was 18, which was 10 years ago. You've now been at Xero for a couple of years as the CEO.
More than a couple. 4 in October.
Yeah, almost 4 years. So much has been happening just in the last few years. Maybe just help us paint the picture. What is the current state of Xero and what are we most excited about at the moment?
Sure. Well, Xero continues to be a great performer, both I think as a business and we hope also as a backbone for small businesses and accountants. Obviously, we're going to talk about AI. That's an exciting part of our future. But just to give a bit of a sense of the business, we reported earnings in May. The company grew 31% year over year. We're up at 2.7 billion. We've given guidance to the market this year that, we expect to be around 3.7 billion in top line sales. That's NZ. So, this year should see us, cross almost $2 billion, about $2 billion USD in revenue with the guidance for the coming year. But on a reported basis, we just did 2.7 last year. NZ, we grew free cash flow to 757 million. NZ, rule of 48.5 as reported, also up pretty materially. And I just think to juxtapose this, the Xero I entered was maybe $800 million USD in sales. So we're almost, well over double in size, approaching triple, was not profitable. Was, below rule of 40. And I think the most important stats are the ones I haven't even talked about yet. We serve now over 5 million customers. We announced that number in early July. So 5 million customers globally, including well over 1 million in the UK, obviously ANZ over 2 million, and the US is now our fastest growing region with the acquisition of Melio combined with our US operations. So a lot of exciting stuff in our big markets. And then I think if you were to think about what we're excited about for the future, well, of course, I think it is, I always say, it is a builder's era. Like we are software builders. We build software to unleash the productivity of small businesses around the world, right? And so for us, AI is a tremendous opportunity. It is an opportunity to build software that multiplies the productivity of our end customer who's always short on time and managing pretty tight cash flows. We're also excited about payments. The acquisition of Melio added to our organic payments business, which is one of the fastest growing businesses at Xero. And that allows us to help small businesses manage not only their time, which is what AI does, but also their cash flow, which is what all our payment products do around the world. And so I think these two trends are amazing for us and exciting. And of course, our core product continues to be well loved, well used, simple to use, and supports both small businesses and the advisors they work for, whether inside the building, like a part-time bookkeeper, or outside the building, like a classic accountant and bookkeeper. So much more to come, but a strong business, unique tailwinds in financial services and in AI, an opportunity to serve small businesses, at multiple levels of value.
Okay, so two trends there to unpack. One is the geo kind of expansion. And the second is, now has never been a better time to be a build to ride, but it's also never been easier to build. Let's talk about like the geo standpoint. So this company, Melio, which you mentioned, it'd be helpful if we elaborate here. One of the biggest things I've always been surprised about, to be honest, is although Xero has been around for 20 years, born out of New Zealand, a Kiwi company, getting and cracking America has actually been a lot harder than anticipated. Why do you think it has been so hard to crack America, and any characteristics behind that?
I think it's important to note that Xero's organic business over the last 4 years has grown from 15% year-over-year growth to 30% year-over-year growth, excluding Melio. So we've doubled the growth rate of the business in the US, excluding Melio. And then, of course, we bought a very high growth asset. So when you combine the two businesses, the US is now our fastest growing region. So look, I think people want some complex answer. It's often a question of like, what are you doing for the market, from the market, and what is the local state of the market, including incumbents? So obviously in the US, we face Xero is 20 years old, Intuit is 40 years old and born from the US. So, a fierce competitor, who has 100% of their attention effectively on that market. Intuit's not known very well outside of the US as being competitive, but inside the US, that is their home territory, and they've been at it twice as long as Xero. So I think it's quite important to understand that. So strong incumbent. By the way, that incumbent was grown on desktop. We came to the market in cloud, and we drove the innovation of cloud in the US, including QuickBooks moving off a desktop product. So, Xero's arrival into the US spurred the growth of the cloud market in the US. And I think that's an important characteristic. It's still the world's biggest SMB market. We still have lots of businesses that continue to come from paper, and that helps both Xero and Intuit. But we were certainly a catalyst for the movement to the cloud in the US, by putting pressure, on the existing ecosystem with a rather innovative way of doing business that we kind of created in New Zealand. But I think the third thing is when you kind of are a challenger in a market, not the native, you have to think about, what you need to do really well and how you differentiate. And I think that story has been growing for us in the US. So what have been the major moves? First and foremost, doubling down on product building for the US from the US. So when I arrived, the first thing we did was establish that we will have engineers from the US working on the US, along with a deeper product commitment to the US market. By that, I mean a deeper product team and bench from the US competing in the US rather than trying to compete with, partial focus from the Southern Hemisphere. So very simple tactics. Number two, narrowing our focus. Like, stop trying to serve everybody. Serve an area where you can differentiate it. What we identified is Xero is easier to use, cheaper than Intuit. By the way, more open than Intuit. What do I mean by that? Very simple. We have an open stack. You want to mix and match Xero with Melio? Go ahead. You don't want to use Melio? You want to use Ramp? Go ahead. You want to mix and match our software with Gusto? Go ahead. Avalara, Bill. I can go. We have 1,000 apps, and the US is a self-service choice market. So our competitor remains closed. We remain open. I would say we're even more open today than we have been historically. Melio offers its products independently of Xero, which is great. We also offer the product integrated with Xero because it works so well together, but you don't have to buy it that way. Melio offers a syndicated product where you can get bill pay for small businesses on bank sites. Xero has now syndicated its product, and we offer accounting on, neobanks like Bluevine. So our thesis to the world is more value, easier to use, more innovative, and by the way, open. And so I think you need to know what your stance is, right? Like, as a challenger, what do you bring to the table and for whom? And so we also, identified our focus as employing small businesses and their accountants and went hard at it. So double down on product importance. Then we, of course, looked to narrow our focus, understand our differentiators. Melio is an addition on top of that now, rounding out the product suite. Today we have payments, that we fully own. We have Gusto, we have Xero all together in one stack that you can buy from us. And we are continuing to increase our, just I'd say steady execution in this market.
This is such an important point around focus and really understanding your customer. I speak to so many of these founders, and even startups who are going through the likes of Y Combinator or other accelerators or just being funded. They want to target everyone straight away, but actually having a very narrow focus is almost much better outcome long-term, right? When you came into Xero, was this actually a focus on really narrowing down that ICP? And what did that turnaround actually look like?
Sure. By the way, I think Xero, we created focus overall in the strategy. So as you may or may not be aware, but we're finishing a strategy period this year, this fiscal year, fiscal 27, but the strategy period began in fiscal 25, 3 years ago, and we called our strategy the 3x3. 3 big markets, 3 big jobs. The US, the UK, Australia as disproportionate drivers of growth among the 180 markets we serve. And we said payments, payroll, accounting, fill the stack. These 3 jobs are what customers tell us they want Xero to do. And payments, I mean payments in, invoicing, we do that. Payments out, bill pay. And increasingly, there are even more payment products you can offer, obviously. But these 3 jobs, every time we survey small business, they expect Xero to do for them. So I think it's about macro focus. And then within that, of course, what's the US ICP? I think it's quite important. I think you also know this if you talk to startup founders. While it's amazing to dream big, when you're attacking something, you need to help people figure out how to sequence, right? So I remember when I arrived at Xero, I arrived to, at least to several consulting decks where the ask of the company to a consultant was, how does Xero have 5 million customers in the US? And I was like, hey guys, no offense. We have 5 million globally and we're a very good business. I'm like, before we solve for 5 million, how about we solve for, smaller numbers? In the US, 500,000, 1 million customers. I mean, today with between Melio and Xero, we're already approaching 500,000 paid subscribers or customers. But I was like, can we just narrow the focus? Before you solve 5 million, how about solving 1 million? How about solving 500,000? Before you solve all that, how about looking at ARPU? Oh, by the way, before you solve that, to my team, I said, hey, first things, just narrow your focus to a revenue number that would make you a US unicorn. So I basically was like, before you think of anything else, just look at US revenues. This is pre-Melio. At this number, at this run rate and this number, if you were an independent company, you would be $1 billion unicorn. We focused on that number. We got to that number. So I do think it's really about narrowing your scope first. Don't try to eat the elephant, right? Focus. So I think that applies to Xero globally because we have such a big footprint. Remember, we're not just multiple countries, we're multiple products. By the way, we're multiple channels and we're multiple segments. So you have to increase the focus for sure.
It's not normal. The opportunity to run a large company and a well-known company like Xero doesn't come up very much, right? How did this all come about for you? How did the opportunity to join Xero and kind of take on a massive challenge and really turning this darling of an startup ecosystem of a company turn around?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when you are a CEO, you really, I always say to be successful requires not just your execution, but a good business in a good market with macro tailwinds. And so I think you probably are aware, I was the CEO of StubHub, ran that business for eBay, and then it was spun, and so led the spin, right, and the sale of StubHub. And then I took time off to write a book, and I was in the market for my kind of another CEO opportunity after writing the book. And so I spent almost 2 years, between jobs, wrote a book for a year, got it published. And then my second year was really turn my attention to the job search. How did I know Xero was the right one? Well, let's talk about, characteristics of strong companies. Number one, I said macro tailwinds. Is the market growing? Right? The market for small business digitization is growing all over the world. Despite the fact that New Zealand has high cloud penetration, all of these jobs I talked about, payroll, payments, accounting, tax, in most jurisdictions we serve, there's still an opportunity to give small businesses more productivity. And we know that AI will now create new business models, but even pre-AI, right? Small business digitization macro tailwind. Number two, to your point, a product that has community love. People love the product. It's elegant software. It's simple to use. It works. And so, obviously I was looking for a product that I think people really grok to. 3, I was looking for a customer I can identify with. I've been a founder 3 times. More importantly, you may or may not be aware, I was a Xero customer for one of my startups long before I was approached about the CEO opportunity. So when I got the call, I did turn to my husband and said, I've been looking for almost a year. The day I got the Xero call, which I got through a recruiter, I was like, I don't know. I think this could be it. I know the software. I know the product. I'm a user, and I have admiration for the company. So I did know Xero. And then the last and important characteristic is I would say go where your strengths are valued and your values fit. And, I think that is the magical combination. I think Xero is, known to be inclusive, diverse, globally minded. I'm an Indian Canadian immigrant to the United States. By the way, I was an immigrant to Canada and then, immigrated to the United States. At Google, I ran our international business for almost 6 years and grew it to a multi-billion-dollar operation. Having to hold China and Brazil and India and Indonesia as a basket of countries, but feeling like maybe I could bridge those cultures and bring the best of tech. So, I saw that also at Xero as an opportunity and an opportunity where maybe I could come and do my best work.
Today's episode is partnered with Hostinger. Hostinger are the perfect tool for builders like you and I to turn these crazy ideas we have into reality. Hostinger provides everything we could possibly want to get going. They provide web, email, cloud hosting, and even in today's environment, we need that perfect vibe coding tool to turn these crazy ideas we have into reality. Now, Hostinger are providing our audience with 10% off. All you need to do is head over to hostinger.com/new economies or enter code new economies. Hostinger is trusted by millions of builders and they provide everything at affordable prices. And it's time for you to get building. I promise you it'll be worth it. Go and do it. Now, back to today's episode. When someone joins a new company, I think it's one of those things you have to very quickly be either respected or liked. I think it's very difficult to be both. Did you have one of those intentions when you went into Xero? And what did that look like?
Well, let's just back up from Xero for a moment. I think I've had the good fortune throughout my career, for the most part, and I've been very public about the couple times I didn't, I think it was a startup called Polyvore for 6 months and I got out, but over a 30-year career, I've spent, the majority of my time at companies where my values fit, my strengths are valued. And what do I mean by that? I mean that, how I naturally show up, intense, energetic, engaged, passionate, able to handle many things at once. I went to companies where maybe that stance and capability set was really appreciated, needed, fit the culture. Some people call me aggressive. I'm a go for it kind of person. And so I've always been at places where that was considered, overwhelmingly strength, not weakness, if that was, and maybe also what the company needed, right? I've been in high growth situations. I've been in turnaround situations. I've been in challenging situations. I've been in COVID, where maybe that kind of leadership energy also really fits and helps complement the other cadre of leadership values. I never think you're alone. You're you're trying to find your complement with the people you work with, right? You don't all need to be the same, but together you need to be mighty. So I think that I've had that combination throughout my career. So to come back to your question, liked or respected, first of all, go where you fit. Go where you fit, where your values fit, where you have a sense of, that you can do and be yourself. So I think I've mostly been in situations where I can be myself. Now, I don't know, I hope most people respect my capabilities. I don't seek to be, to your point, liked. I seek to be myself. I seek to be authentic, transparent, tell it like it is, be somebody who cares deeply. And, that's sort of just my leadership stance. And lucky for me, that formula has worked.
The reason why I ask this is when you enter a new company, right? You probably have so many ideas, things you want to make better, maybe some things you need to fix pretty quickly. And I think it was 3 months into the job, you basically had to make the pretty harsh call, right? To cut costs and save cash. Something like 700-800 jobs, had to be cut. That's obviously a really hard call to make. As a new CEO who's just come into the company, you're trying to get, well placed, like you said, you're trying to, find your feet. That's a hard call. Take me back to those 3 months.
Yeah, sure. Look, I remember when I said that one of my leadership values is transparency and tell it like it is. I presume people are smart. I presume people care deeply. And I think that showing respect for people is about, being honest. And so when I arrived at Xero, I did, as any new CEO does, I did have a thesis likely from the outside in that we would need to cut costs, but I also wanted to make sure that was correct. So I had the benefit of having 3 months, sitting with the other CEO before I officially took over. So I did something like, I don't know, I think I met or surveyed with probably over 1,000 Xeros. I ran a survey. I did multiple leadership meetings. And then in my first CEO address the day I started officially as the CEO, 3 months in, I read back what I heard from Xeros. And then so I gave them an inside out, strengths, weaknesses, and what I heard. And then I gave them an outside in. I said, I also believe that you guys should understand how we're situated relative to tech. Because our ambitions as we get to the size are to be like best in class, right? Like, what are we here for? We're here to aspire and to build an even better and more awesome company. So let me tell you how we're doing. And I read back external benchmarks. At the same time, we did work with McKinsey to do a benchmarking of the company's size and scale for its revenues. So we had an inside out and you had two outside ins. One outside in was just me reporting back how we sat against relative SaaS benchmarks, which showed that we were performing well on revenue and performing much less well on efficiency. And meanwhile, we also had McKinsey come and benchmark us with data on the size of our different departments relative to other companies of our scale and size. So you read that back on day one, and on day one, people asked me in all hands, like, "Are you going to do layoffs?" And I didn't say anything, but I just said, my job is to share with you a picture of Xero. And so I think it was maybe an all hand or two later. I think that was February. I think we announced these changes on March 9th. So it wasn't 3 months in, it was probably 6 weeks in. But at that point, I will tell you, I think it was very hard, but Xero's understood the underlying data set that led to that conclusion. I'm like, start how you intend to go, right? I started with transparency on what we were amazing at and, what was more challenging. Like I said, tell people like it is, do it quickly if you're going to make a hard decision. So I tried to do that. And I'll tell you, the day I announced it, I was definitely a little heartbroken. It was very difficult for me to do. So I teared up a little bit in my all hands, but I was just honest. I'm like, I'm really sorry, but like, we've got to make this move for the betterment of Xero. And my Slack messages were filled that night with Xeros I'd never met asking me if I was okay. So that tells you something about the company. Tells you about its own values, like hard decision. But I had, equally people who emailed me and said, "Hey, are you okay? Hey, I'm sure that was a really hard decision. I respect you making it." People were just checking on me. And that's also Xero. So it's a pretty special place.
It says a lot about the company culture, but also if we look at the rate AI companies are growing today, and especially a lot of these legacy software companies who are also making layoffs, obviously times are changing, right? I think this next question is going to be super helpful, I think, for a lot of founders who may have to go through this at some stage. If someone does need to prepare for a layoff, what does that actually look like? Can you take me through that process?
Sure. Look, first and foremost, tech goes in boom and bust. I like at my own startup, Yodely, I had to do 3 rounds of layoffs. And I was like, at the time, I was like 29 years old. I was laying off people who were my age and my friends, but I happened to be their boss. Like it was the first time. I mean, it was heartbreaking, right? But look, I think that the first and most important thing is to understand the cash position or the efficiency position of any company, right? I mean, that is like it's table stakes, use data, and if you don't have access to the data, get some help, right? Whether it's an outside in, whether it's a part-time CFO, somebody to help you assess the situation. Number 2, I think that, while you can't maybe explicitly say, I need to do a layoff, when people ask you, breadcrumb, be honest. Like say what you can say. Say, hey, I am thinking about this or whatever. 3, don't delay. Leaving people in an uncertainty for a long time. It's not great for them. And it's certainly not good stewarding of shareholder money. Number 4, like if it's hard, you can still make a hard decision and say, it's hard. I'm making it, but it's hard. Like, I think sometimes people just want to know that you appreciate it's hard, that you believe it's your job as a leader. So I don't know if like being unvulnerable is a strength, honestly. I think as a leader, I mostly believe that if you're vulnerable, and honest, people will respect you more for making hard decisions. So I think you're trying to, follow some basic principles, data, giving people certainty, breadcrumbing, if you're not able to sort of, tell people when, just helping them understand the industrial logic or the way you're thinking about things, moving swiftly, because I think that is, important for people. So look, I've had to lay off throughout my career. I had to lay off at StubHub and COVID. We laid off 60% of the company in like 2 weeks. I mean, it's sometimes these are just these are the cycles of tech in particular.
I almost feel, although companies always have to go through those challenging times, right? Some, not all will have to layoffs, but we're always going to have these challenging times in some degree, right?
I mean, yeah, it's not
I mean,
always
it's tech.
sunshine.
it's not all rosy days, right? But I feel if you have to make a big decision like that, the biggest thing any company can do is actually help those who are being laid off or affected, just feel great, give them all the support they need. When you did have to make that call, how do you actually think about, okay, is it this department we have to lay off? Like, do you have to go through name by name? Like, how, like actually physically and logistically,
Yeah, I mean,
how
again,
does this all work?
you do it outside and with data. I mean, typically for someone like me, particularly a larger company, again, benchmarking data, working with HR. These are all kind of very normal course and ways to do it. I think, again, be data driven. And then to your point, I think you hit the other one is like, as much as possible, move swiftly because it's human to do that too. And then thirdly, yes, if you can, try and offer people benefits, help. How people leave you also matters. So while I believe transparency is important, if you can do more for your people, of course, if you can afford to, sometimes, in a startup situation, when people are running out of cash, there is no cash to give people. So, what you can do for people is relative to your financial circumstances. But obviously, even if you can help, maybe you can't help with money. There have been companies that have laid off where the founder posts a list of the people they've had to lay off and said, these are great people. Like, this is a situation of the company. Like, this is my list. If any of you can help them find a job. Like, many people use different tactics to show care and doing what you can for people on the way out. But as I said, I'm going to come all the way back to the beginning. Your job is also to steward the interests of shareholders and to create value for the company. Do not conflate the two. Like, the company's job, a CEO's job, the job of leadership is to create value for all constituents, shareholders, customers, right? And do so while creating a great culture. But it's not to create a great culture that doesn't create value.
Honestly, I'd love to get inside a day of the life of your work. You're running this huge company, couple thousand, team members now. You're publicly listed, 5,000 people, right? Which is just insane.
Yeah, just approaching this year we'll do 3.7 billion in revenue, at least according to our guidance.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a large organization.
It's a pretty large organization. Let's talk about being a publicly listed company CEO. It's hard out there. Markets are choppy.
At the end of the day, I think, remember the word we started with, focus and value creation. I would say be a value creator, be focused, be prepared to make hard decisions, be transparent, be authentic, keep delivering. Good times, bad times, choppy times, like, be a consistent deliverer and creator of value and make hard decisions along the way.
Well, it's the most challenging part of the job right now for you.
I don't know. Remember, it's also a really fun time. I know everyone loves to look at headlines or whatever. Like, I've been a builder for 30 years. I've been an entrepreneur 3 times over. I have had the privilege of being at some of the world's best companies. I love leadership and I love tech. So, just keep in mind all the things you love about the job in good and bad situations. Why do people operate through all of these circumstances, good, bad, choppy, not choppy? It's because they love what they do and because they think they can have an impact, right? And so what's it like right now? Sure, it's choppy outside. My job is to keep delivering. It's to remind Xeros that this is an era for builders of which we are one. To be clear that the opportunity for our customers has never been larger, and us for them. Remember, we serve small businesses. So I know why everybody talks about AI. Their challenge is also figuring out how to use AI to get that time back, money back, and better intelligence. It's to democratize access to AI for them, right? Because, while there's some who can build on Claude, the vast majority, we survey them, like are trying to make sense of what AI means for them. And they're going to look to us to help do that. What a tremendous opportunity. So what's it like out there right now? Yeah, it's choppy. I don't think the market can understand like one SaaS company from another. That's okay. Like I understand our opportunity and my job is to keep our employees focused on that. And as I said, I'm a builder of global tech and I love what I do.
I love it. We said earlier at the beginning of the show, it's never been a better time to be a builder, but it's also never been a more challenging time to be a builder, right? What is the state of SMBs out there? We had Eddie Kim, the co-founder of Gusto, also on the show a few months ago, and both of you do an amazing job of actually like looking after all these small enterprises. But at the end of the day, these are very small companies. They have finite resources. Like you said, they're still making sense of everything what's happening. What is the lay of the land for small businesses out there?
Yeah, look, we also just did recently a survey of our customers to understand and kind of start to think about AI archetypes. Here's what I can tell you. When we survey our customers, our cross-section shows an entire range of customers. The majority are what we would call, non-AI native and early in experimenting with AI, the vast majority. Then we have a meaningful minority, which is why we have integrations with people like Claude. We just announced our integration with Microsoft. Of course, a year ago, we partnered with OpenAI. But our Claude integration shows us what the data also tells us, that there's an increasing minority who are very comfortable with AI and they want more from us. We can see that they're using Claude. We can see that number is growing. We can see that they're trying to build apps on themselves. By the way, we also see that in our App Store. We're 4x up on people using our APIs since January, on the type of people trying to build software on top of Xero. It's also why we announced Xero Force. So you have this very meaningful adopter minority. Does that make sense? But they are a minority. And so our job is to serve this gamut and meet them where they are. So we have products for the advanced. Xero Force is our newest product. That's about building custom workflows that in our secure environment using all our infrastructure. We have, of course, our Claude connector. We have our Microsoft integration. As I said, we have multiple, deals in the AI space to allow them to access Xero securely through these connectors. Then we have a massive kind of, I'd say, swath in the middle where we are pushing AI features that make sense smartly and accurately into our products by creating the right harnesses and context layer, which is so important if you want accuracy on top of those AI features, which is the core of what we do, right? We do tax, we do accounting, we do insights, we do payments. So to become a system of action, you also need to be accurate. And so we have a wide swath where we're pushing AI into the product and allowing them to experiment on our core. And then we have brand new services for people who maybe are even behind that. They just want AI chat because, everybody in the world now is learning that, do you use a Google search bar box or do you use Gemini? They're becoming pretty interchangeable right now, right? So imagine if your experience is a chatbot. Well, then our job is to make things like Jax or customer support using AI work easily for you. We just rolled AI out to 100% of our customers in customer support. By the way, we've never had that. We have never had a live offering of customer support in our history. We never had a call center. We've never had anything. Today, we have 100% coverage now of you can get live customer support using AI. Never before had it in our history. That's the most basic feature. So that's the gamut we're running right now.
When you think about partnering with these AI models, you just mentioned Claude and, OpenAI last year. I feel like, there are potentially more models that are going to come along, right? We just had Reid Hoffman, the co-founder, on the show as well. And we both agreed that, okay, right now there are maybe 4 or 5 companies that you can partner with, but actually over the coming years, potentially they're going to be 10 or 15, right? Some will come from the US, some will come from China, and so on. How do you think about partnering with AI models in particular?
Yeah, look, the good news for us is, first of all, remember, before there was AI, the AI generative AI, it was traditional AI and machine learning. We've been built on machine learning for like 20 years. So we have data scientists, data engineering, data architecture inside the building. So I think our general stance will, of course, be to try and be model agnostic while using the best model for the task. Now, you're also going to ask me the question about cost. Another consideration here will be cost for the task, right? But it's really cost times efficacy times the task. That relates to the features we build for customers. It also relates to obviously how we're going to use AI to increase our own productivity, right? So this space is evolving so rapidly, as you know. I mean, it's so rapid. It's like incredible, right?
Yeah.
So I would say like every 3 months, the context changes. And what you need right now is flexibility while taking advantage of the current state to also have the flexibility for a future state, right? So that's the way we think about it. Do we think there will be multiple models and even more? Yes. Will we have to optimize which model we use for the cost versus the efficacy of a given feature, for our customers? Yes. Will we have to navigate which model we use internally in engineering and non-engineering for the building of our own workflows? Yes. The answer to all of this is yes. So what is the name of the game? Adaptability, flexibility, constant learning, and thinking about that in your internal and external software stacks.
When a company's the size of Xero, 5,000 people, flexibility is great, but also you don't want too much flexibility, right? How do you think about that? Because it gets complicated.
Yeah, almost everywhere in the world, you don't want too much flexibility. What you want is like constrained flexibility, right? To your point. So, we may choose what our primary and secondary models are going to be, right? We may choose what models we use in engineering versus what we give to our citizen builders. We have citizen builders all across Xero right now who are building, new agents internally to do tasks, right? So I think you do need to give people constraints. By the way, I think that's almost true everywhere. If you gave somebody a blank sheet and said, write me a great story, most people would be like, what? You would have to say, write me a great story of this length about this topic in this amount of time. And you would get something, right? So the same is true of a company. Like, yes, you want people to be innovative, but they can be more innovative if you also give them the constraints.
Exactly, right? There is so much flexibility, but also like just the power of these tools inside companies now is just insane. So many of these founders who I have on the show, now is almost 100% of code is written by AI. One founder was saying, yesterday, how much code is written by these AI tools now for Xero?
Yeah, I think we are very different than a startup that is greenfield that only ever built code in AI, right? Remember, like we are a pretty complex technical architecture over 20 years. So we have brownfield code and we have greenfield code. So the answer is it depends. It would depend on the feature and the area. I can tell you about features we built today that have been built entirely AI natively. They tend to be in greenfield areas. We're building something from scratch. And then areas where it's not all auto-generated tend to be brownfield, where we have brownfield code, where the founder of Databricks once said, which I think is quite important, if you release code into like a brownfield stack and just let it loose, how do you know it's not malware? No, really. How do you know? So I think for us, it's about, there's so much you can do, obviously, inside of software development and how you code, releases, QA. There are areas or constrained areas where you might rewrite code with AI. But I think in a brownfield area, it's not as simple as like, just let AI write code. I'm like, okay, well, you have, and remember our software, right? People talk about how easy it is to code accounting software. It might be easy to code from scratch accounting software for the first 50%. You know what we have inside of Xero? We have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of edge cases in our code. All right, you want to release AI code and wipe out 100 edge cases? That doesn't seem super smart. So I think it's a much more nuanced answer. Is it a boon for product development? Of course. And software engineering. But I think you would find we're taking different slices, right? And thinking about the application of AI to those slices of the code base, to products, to back-end code versus front-end code. It's not nearly so simple as like, let's just, have nobody write any software.
I think it's changing, right? But also honestly, my biggest concern for a lot of these companies is about how do they stay relevant? We just had, if you look at like Airtable, right, last week, they got acquired for $1.2 billion enterprise value based on $450 million in annual recurring revenue. Not a great multiple for investors. And if you think like Airtable was the most popular product 5-10 years ago, now you just go into Claude OpenAI and it'll do it for you. I'd love to get your honest take here. How does Xero think about staying relevant?
Well, first of all, we're not just application software, right? We are infrastructure. Let's start with the infrastructure layer. We are multiple layers of value. So I think if you are a very thin wrapper of application software that can easily just be rewritten, right? That's one way to think about it. Remember, we think of ourselves as a multi-tiered stack. So first of all, let's start with infrastructure. We are connected to regulators. We are connected to payment rails. We are connected to banks. We are connected to tax authorities. We have pipes at the below any application software. There are pipes across all our markets to and from, right, in and out of Xero that, collect data, authenticate transactions, authenticate tax, authenticate compliance, hold compliance rules. So there's an entire infrastructure layer. I think I've told the story publicly that I went to Claude maybe a year ago if I could even go now, to try and build a Xero competitor. And it could build me a skinny wrapper. And then when I was like, hey, no, I'd like to make this commercial grade, they're like, well, you need to connect to Plaid and Yodlee. I'm like, okay, what next? Well, you need to connect to, I'm like, oh, okay, those are all the connections I have at Xero. So if you're telling me you have to replicate the entire infrastructure stack of Xero, oh, okay, go ahead. Like we're going to keep building on that infrastructure. Now that infrastructure also includes regulated payments. So fraud, compliance. If you want to go build infrastructure to, have safe and secure payments across 52 states, knock yourself out. That's what we have with Melio. Like, go ahead, replicate all our infrastructure. While you're replicating our infrastructure, we're going to keep building value. So there's the infrastructure layer. Then there's the data layer. We are a system of record, of course. That means we take in data, we process data, we cleanse data, we aggregate data, we anonymize data, we analyze data. Like, we keep data securely, right? We can expose that data to those people who want to build applications on top of Xero. Okay, then you have our first party application suite, which is all of that software I'm talking about: payments, payroll, tax, compliance, right, in and out. And then, of course, there's secondary jobs we also do. We do that across 180 countries. Horizontally, we serve several countries very deeply. And then we keep, of course, updating that software. And now that software also comes bundled with AI. And by the way, that AI is trained on our proprietary data. And by the way, it's trained at scale. So, okay, if you're a startup and you want to train your data, knock yourself out. I'm going to keep training my data at my increasing scale. Okay, let's go further. We, of course, let people build other applications on our software. Because remember, I said we're an open stack. If you want to build AI-powered software on top of Xero, I'm happy to have you do it. By the way, I'd rather you leverage my infrastructure to do it, because it's secure and it's safe. And it comes with, my harnesses, which I think, we will invest in based on our data. So you can go build it on Claude. Okay, I don't know what context layer you're using, but if you'd like to, go ahead. We'll keep building on our infrastructure. Okay, let's go further. Now we acquire customers. We acquire customers across accountants. We acquire them across direct channels. By the way, we acquire them across multiple segments. We acquire them across multiple markets. We're also profitable at scale. We spend money at scale to acquire more customers. Oh, by the way, we also are integrated with all the AI native players who control distribution, as well as search, as well as organic brand. So I'm going to keep spending money to acquire more customers on my stack. And by the way, that stack comes with 20 years of trust and data in what we do. So you can build your startup, and I'll keep building my advantages across the stack.
I think you made a great point there. Trust is potentially the biggest moat for these companies.
Yeah, like lots of times people ask me about the software startup that is building maybe accounting faster than I am. I'm like, okay, I accept that they can build this thin slice of software faster. They also need to raise the capital to invest in all the rest. They also need to go pay to acquire customers. They also need trusted data. They also need it to be accurate. They also need it to be compliant. They also need it to work. By the way, they also need it to do multiple jobs, because I price my software for multiple jobs in it. So, there is so much more to this. And it's why I'm excited for Xero. Like, man, I'm going to keep saying it. What an amazing time to be building software. But not just software, to invest in a vertical stack, right? That has increasing economies of scale.
And I think also potentially the biggest opportunity, I think, for Xero is, how do you make these small enterprises, SMBs, more successful?
I mean, think about the business models that are coming. Should you be outcome based, right? Like, there's so many choices. Business models we never had. We never had Xero Force. It simply didn't exist. It's a brand new offering. So, of course, there's AI in our current offering. Well, we also would agree that there's so much yet that is, as the pie expands and new pools of value are created, how do we participate in those pools? So I think that, like I said, you can say it's a challenging time. It's also an unprecedented time.
For sure. Now I think about it, there are so many opportunities like for Xero, right? But what do you think is still missing from the pie that you really want to create this year?
Well, I think we're on a multi-year journey, so you can't say it's what's missing this year. What do I think is still missing? Look, I think that if you just stepped back and you took yourself out of the ecosystem of Silicon Valley, you know what the macro challenge is? We're all busy building, right? Like we have to stop and think about the customer's ability to adopt. Remember, I have a whole gamut of products from AI-powered chat to, what we call auto bank reconciliation, which is we'll just do the action for you. We'll just reconcile for you. You just have to check if it's right? Like you're human in the loop. To Zero Force, to, people building on our APIs. So remember, I have the advantage of seeing all the data, all the understanding. So I think what is like, there are things that I can't control. And I've been a founder, again, 3 times over. Do you know how many times I've built software ahead of the consumer curve? Ask me. Yodely. Oh, yes. Joyous. Yes. Like, ask me. Like 10 years too early, both times, right? Right, but early. The customer wasn't ready. So look, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is not just the pace that we can all build at, but what is the pace of cognitive adoption and comfort with these tools? And I think it's very different to say you're a user of AI because you ask Gemini a question and you get a better answer than search. And saying, I am going to use Claude to log into my bank account and perform financial actions on my behalf because I gave it a voice command.
It's very true. I think, something I've been thinking about honestly is there is this whole startup battle on the legal space. You got like Legora and Harvey. We haven't really seen that much happening in accounting. Do you think accountants will still be relevant in the next 5 years?
Yes. I think they will be. And by the way, people talk about accounting being disrupted and how it might be, how the accountant might be disrupted because what if you can, get all the answers from Claude? Let's remember, and this is my belief as well. If you could get all the answers on everything, do you think it's always black and white? Do you think you want an accountant to tell you, like, should you take that edge case? Should you not take that edge case? Okay, you have your financials. Do you think most small businesses are highly financially literate? So Claude spits out you numbers. Do you think it's going to tell you what to do? And it tells you what to do with those numbers. Are you going to ask anyone? I think let's remember the value of human advice. Remember the value of judgment. By the way, let's remember that in accounting, the fastest growing part of the field right now is called CAS, Client Advisory Services. These are accountants trying to move out of task-based work into higher value. Does AI accelerate that opportunity for them? What do you think? Oh, by the way, there's a shortage in the profession in most places where enough new grads are not entering. So why do they want digitization? To become more profitable themselves. What would they like AI to do? Take out all the manual work and help them move from somebody who's paid hourly for producing a tax return to somebody who is valued for their advice.
I agree. We're going to see a lot more of these, right? Hopefully the same with maybe legal architecture, like all of these AI companies, right, which are enabling them to become smarter with their time.
And new pools of value will get created. Some pools of value will get commoditized. But the historic lesson of tech is, does tech wipe out markets or multiply markets? I don't know. Did the car wipe out transportation or multiply local hospitality and travel?
I agree. There was this whole debate when AI was coming out. It was like, AI is going to take over our jobs. But actually, a graph recently pointed out that the companies which are enabling AI are the ones hiring the most versus the companies which aren't using AI, they're not hiring at all. So it's the complete opposite,
again,
right?
I think come back to that word. You have to be flexible. You have to be an adopter to take advantage of what's possible. So I think if you want to resist the opportunities of AI, is it possible that, pools of value that you could otherwise transform or grow, you don't attain? Yes, that's possible. But if you are a net adopter and understand what's possible, your ability to do more with this technology and increase your own value multiplies. So that's also why when people say like, oh, software engineers are going to go away, I'm like, don't be so sure. When software engineers are 10 times as productive, doesn't it mean we can build 10 times as much? Like, what is the opportunity to go build more?
It's exciting times, One of the questions I love to ask on this show is, if I was to come and be your chief of staff for a week, What would we be doing together? And what do those days typically look like for you?
Well, first of all, as many people will tell you, I'm fiercely independent. So I don't need a chief of staff
That's okay.
and take my notes. But I do like somebody who can help me think about tasks and projects that need to get done. So if you were with me for a week, I think you'd find that my week is pretty varied, as you might expect, between external facing needs, whether it's something like this or talking to investors or articulating our strategy. That might be 20 to 30% of my time is outward facing, talking to customers, what have you. Again, 20 to 30% of my time is just core execution. And that can be from a strategic decision all the way to like, hey, how are we going to make the half on this metric? We're running behind. Like, what do we need to do to get it to green? And then a third of my time is people related. It's helping our people be successful, whether that's one-on-one, whether that's programs at scale, whether that's having to manage something difficult like a layoff, or whether that's architecting a new system for high performers to keep them at zero, whether that's architecting a system for low performers to help manage low performance, all of those things. So it's probably a third, or maybe it's 25. I don't know. You get the picture. And then you'd find that's incredibly varied, and that's the funnest part of my job, just the variety of it.
And how do you spend time outside of Xero when you're not focusing on trying to build?
First of all, because I travel so much, I am ruthlessly unscheduled in my private time. The only things that are scheduled, tennis. I love to play tennis. I'm not that good at it, but I play regularly 2 to 3 times a week. I love to just be with my kids, right? They're older now. And so my opportunities are sometimes limited, right? If I'm home for a day, it might just be catching my son as he goes to have breakfast, or home in the evening. On the weekends, it's watching sports. My daughter plays water polo. My son plays, basketball. My other son is in the city and 26. So I don't get to see him play sports, but it's probably time with my family, playing tennis. And then anybody who knows me that I treat shopping like a sport. So but it's unscheduled because so much of my life is scheduled. So I am pretty selfish with my personal time. I'm pretty clear. I do the things that make me happy. And I keep it pretty simple. My family's healthy. My kids are good. I get to do some of what I love, and I go to work and I love what I do. My cup is full.
I love that. If you're a tennis fan, we just have Maria Sharapova on the show. So next time you've got a long haul flight, you should.
Awesome. Yeah. XeroCon Denver next week, I get to interview Andre Agassi. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Wow. There you go. Hey, this has been amazing. What a cool story. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming on the show. And we can't wait to see where Xero goes next.
Thank you so much.